How many of you have ever been into a room, you've been delivering an idea or a presentation or just talking to a group of people at work, and a little voice in your head has said, why should these people listen to me? Imposter syndrome is something that people have written a lot of books around. There's lots of discussions around it. It crops up on LinkedIn and everywhere else all the time as something that affects lots of people, and often the people who you think it would affect least. As someone who spends a lot of time standing in front of audiences, speaking to senior people about all sorts of complex problems, people say to me a lot, "Bet you don't get nervous anymore, but it doesn't affect you anymore." And it absolutely does. For the most part, I'm fine. But every now and again, and particularly when the pressure's on, I get this sense of why on earth should anybody listen to anything that you have to say? The reason I'm thinking about imposter syndrome at the moment is that on Saturday night, I went to a party, first sort of party like this that I've been to in a while, which is really, really lovely, hosted by, in particular, a couple, one of whom I was at university with, and there were a whole load of my old university friends there, and it was absolutely fantastic to see them, and a lot of them I hadn't seen in a long time. But I went to university with some really, really bright and capable and talented people. It's a great thing. It's the best thing about my university experience. Even now, 20 odd years after I finished, they're quite an intimidating bunch. Don't get me wrong, they're fantastic and I love spending time with them. But when you're in a room with, quite well-known journalists, captains of industry, directors of documentaries and all sorts of things like that, it's when those thoughts can start to seep in. And for me, I've been interested in looking a little bit deeper as to why that might happen. This is very personal, and there will be personal reasons why it affects everybody. So I can only really talk to my own experience. But what I found, and I should stress that this came out of conversations over a good couple of years with a qualified therapist, and I should say at this point, I'm a total therapy advocate. I think everybody should be in therapy of some sort or another. We should treat it like we do the gym. Maybe not as I treat the gym, but as a lot of people treat the gym, as in, little and often. You should go to maintain your health, not just go when there's a problem. We should treat mental health in the same way that we do physical health. But after speaking to a therapist for a couple of years, what I realized was that in some ways I was very lucky, because in one sense, as a 43-year-old gay man, I have never really experienced what I would describe as overt, and certainly not physical homophobia that sadly in 2025 is still something that happens far too often. In that, I don't think I've ever been, I've never felt physically threatened in that respect, touch wood. I don't think I've ever been turned down for a job because of it, and I've never felt like I've been discriminated against. And maybe there's all sorts of reasons why that might be. But, I've been very fortunate in that respect. I am, however, now aware of the homophobia that I had visited for a long time, over decades, on myself. And when people talk about imposter syndrome, I think sometimes people can be very uncharitable in the way that they deal with it. And this is only one reason why imposter syndrome might show up. But I didn't realize exactly, how much growing up in the 80s and 90s without any positive role models. Yes, we were on the television from time to time, but those characters were often sketchily written. They were, I think there's a film that describes gay characters during that time as either noble suffering AIDS victims, friends of noble suffering AIDS victims, or stylish confidants to lovelorn women. Those were the sorts of roles that gay people played, or gay men played in TV and film. But I remember all of the sort of scandals of gay characters appearing in soap operas and things like that, and the way that the tabloid press in particular received that. So that there weren't many role models, there weren't many examples offered up of that you could be gay and happy. As a result, you feel like there is something wrong with you. You feel like you are in some way deficient. And those messages, if there isn't something positive to look at, to look forward to, they can be pretty pernicious and they can stay with you for a long time. And unfortunately, they can crop up when you least expect them to and when you least want them to. Particularly, though, they crop up when you're under pressure. So there's been times when I've really questioned myself, where I'm standing in front of an audience and I say, the little voice crops up and goes, why should these people listen to you? That voice of doubt. So when we talk about imposter syndrome, and I think, as leaders in particular, it's important to realize that, people who might seem very confident within your teams, don't think that they are immune to things like imposter syndrome, because we never know what people's backgrounds are. We don't know what has happened to them in the past that might set them up for that sabotaging little voice that crops up. So we should always say to ourselves as leaders, when people behave in a certain way, yes, maybe they need some support. Maybe there's stuff going on that I don't necessarily know about. That inner saboteur, as it's often called, can be pretty destructive. So just a few thoughts on imposter syndrome. As I am here in Amsterdam, just looking at it, it's rather grey and rather miserable, but I'm always happy to be travelling around. This is why I'm not in my normal spot. So greetings to you wherever you are and wherever you're listening to this from. So what I would say is, be aware of those things as a leader, the things that can sabotage your teams that you have no idea about. But also, as people, again, just a plea, spend some time investing in yourself. This year maybe is the year to start talking to somebody, maybe it's a friend or a colleague. It doesn't necessarily have to be a professional therapist, but asking yourself some questions about why you behave the way that you do, especially when you behave in a way that doesn't serve you. Is there something else going on? Is there something from your past maybe that might be rearing its ugly head and seeking to undermine your confidence, and it's going to stop you potentially from being as brilliant as you can be and achieving the things that you want to achieve? So just some thoughts there about and encouraging you to really invest in yourselves and ask yourself some tough questions. There's a lot going on this year. And we are going to be up against a lot of challenges. A lot of change is going on. We need to be at our best as leaders and as followers. And I think that it's really important that we are just spending some time examining some future saboteurs. And talking to a professional or talking to a friend can be a really good way of just examining, what are some of the things that may be brewing in the background. I'm not a qualified counsellor. I'm not a psychotherapist. And I want to be very clear on that. But, I am somebody who is now much better equipped to deal with that potential saboteur when it rears its ugly head. Anyway, I hope you're all super, super well. I wish you all the very best from lovely Amsterdam, and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care, everyone.